The doctor told me I was lucky to be alive, and that the strange side effects of my head injury would fade. He was wrong. A week later, I could smell my boss's lies about our quarterly earnings, a sharp, acrid scent of burnt toast. Now, all I can smell when my girlfriend kisses me is the sweet, sickly stench of a grave. It started 3 months ago. I was on my bike heading home from my graphic design gig downtown when a sedan with tinted windows ran a red light. I don't remember the impact, just the screech of tires and the world flipping upside down. I woke up in a hospital bed with a concussion, a fractured clavicle, and a headache that felt like a nail being hammered between my eyes. Olivia was there, of course. Her hand was in mine, her face pale with worry, her beautiful green eyes puffy from crying. She'd been there for 8 hours straight, the nurses told me. She was perfect. She is perfect. That's the part that's slowly killing me. The first couple of weeks after I got home were a blur of painkillers and daytime television. Olivia doted on me. She fluffed my pillows, made my favorite soups, and read to me when the words on the page started swimming. My world was soft, and it smelled like her, a comforting mix of lavender and old books. The new thing, the smell thing, started small. It was a Tuesday morning, and my boss, Dave, called to see how I was doing. I was still on medical leave, but he was already hinting about a big project. The quarterly earnings are looking fantastic, Noah, he said, his voice slick with corporate optimism. We're on track for record-breaking bonuses. As he said it, a strange smell hit me. It was sharp, acrid, like a piece of toast left in the toaster for a minute too long. I checked the kitchen. Olivia was asleep, and the toaster was unplugged. The smell was gone as soon as Dave changed the subject. I brushed it off as a phantom scent, another weird side effect of getting my bell rung. But it kept happening. A call from my cable company promising a special, one-time-only deal filled the room with the same burnt toast odor. The kid who delivered our pizza, swearing he hadn't dropped it on the way over, reeked of it. I started to notice a pattern. It only happened when people were telling me something that wasn't true. Little harmless untruths. White lies. The kind of lies people tell to smooth over the rough edges of daily life. It was bizarre, a kind of synesthesia I'd never heard of, but it was almost manageable. A weird party trick my brain had learned after being scrambled. Then came the sulfur. It was during a visit from Olivia's brother, Mark. Mark's always been a bit of a snake, the kind of guy who smiles to your face while looking for an angle. He was telling us about his new investment opportunity, some crypto scheme that was a surefire bet. You guys should get in on the ground floor, he urged, clapping me on my good shoulder. I've already doubled my money. The air suddenly turned foul. It wasn't burnt toast this time. It was thick, heavy, like 1,000 lit matches. The smell of sulfur, brimstone. It was so intense I felt my eyes water. It was the scent of a lie designed to cause harm, a malicious falsehood meant to deceive and exploit. I made an excuse and stumbled to the bathroom, gagging. When I came back, Mark was gone, and the air was clear again. Olivia looked concerned. Are you okay, sweetie? You look like you've seen a ghost. I just nodded, my heart pounding. I was beginning to understand. Burnt toast for a white lie. Sulfur for a dangerous one. My brain had developed its own, terrifyingly accurate lie detector. For a while I tried to ignore it. I focused on getting better, on my physical therapy, on Olivia. Her scent was my sanctuary, that warm, clean smell of lavender and paper that always made me feel safe. She was the one constant in my life, the one person I knew I could trust implicitly. We'd been together for 5 years, building a life in our small, cozy apartment filled with overflowing bookshelves and her ever-growing collection of plants. We talked about everything: marriage, kids, growing old together. In a world that was suddenly full of hidden untruths, Olivia was my rock. She was my truth. Until she wasn't. It was a Thursday night, about a month after the incident with Mark. We were curled up on the couch, watching some dumb reality show. I was finally feeling like myself again. My shoulder was healing, the headaches were less frequent, and I was getting used to my strange new sense. Olivia turned to me, her eyes sparkling in the glow of the TV. She brushed a stray hair from my forehead and smiled, that smile that always made my stomach do a little flip. "I love you more than anything, Noah," she whispered, leaning in to kiss me. And that's when it hit me. It wasn't lavender. It wasn't old books. It was a smell so vile, so profoundly wrong, that my entire body went rigid. It was the sweet, sickly stench of decay. The cloying, damp smell of turned earth and things long dead. The scent of rot. I recoiled instinctively, pulling away from her kiss so abruptly that her lips met empty air. A flicker of confusion and hurt crossed her face. "No, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft with concern. My mind was screaming. I could barely breathe. The smell was everywhere, an oppressive, suffocating cloud that seemed to emanate from her very being. It was the smell of a forgotten basement, of meat left out in the sun, of a blooming corpse. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had to say something, anything to cover my reaction. "Nothing," I stammered, forcing a weak smile. "Just my shoulder twinged. Pushed it too hard in PT today." It was a clumsy lie, and for a terrifying second, I wondered if she could smell it on me. The lie seemed to work. Her expression softened with sympathy. "Oh, honey, you need to be more careful," she said, reaching out to rub my arm. Her touch, which usually grounded me, felt like ice. The scent of decay intensified with her proximity, and I had to fight the urge to gag. I made an excuse about needing some water and fled to the kitchen, my hands shaking as I gripped the counter. What did it mean? My new, cursed sense had rules. Burnt toast for little lies, sulfur for big ones. But this was something else entirely. It wasn't linked to a specific statement. She had just told me she loved me, something she'd said 1,000 times before, something I had never, ever doubted. But this scent wasn't toast or sulfur. It was a fundamental corruption. It was the smell of something pretending to be alive. I spent the next few days in a state of quiet, spiraling panic. I became an obsessive observer, a detective in my own home. I watched Olivia, searching for any crack in her perfect facade. I tried to trigger the smell, to understand its source. I'd ask her casual questions, things I already knew the answer to. "Did you remember to pick up the dry cleaning?" I'd ask, knowing full well she had. "Yes, it's hanging in the closet," she'd reply with a smile. No smell. Nothing but lavender and old books. "Is my blue shirt clean?" "Yes, I washed it yesterday." Nothing. I started testing it with lies. "Honey, I love that new dress your mom bought you," I said one morning, referring to a hideous floral monstrosity she kept in the back of her closet. "Oh, thank you," she beamed. "I love it too." A faint whiff of burnt toast, so faint it was barely there. It was a white lie, a social nicety. The system still worked. But the other smell, the rot, was constant. It wasn't a reaction to a statement, it was just her. It was a low, ambient hum of decay that clung to her like perfume. It was in the clothes she wore, on the pillow she slept on, in the steam that rose from her coffee cup. Some moments it was faint, a whisper of corruption at the edge of my senses. Other times it was overwhelming. When she held me, when she kissed me, the stench would rise up and choke me. I started making excuses to avoid intimacy. I feigned headaches, exhaustion, shoulder pain. Each rejection chipped away at her. I could see the hurt in her eyes, and it tore me apart. How could I explain it? Sorry I can't kiss you, honey. You smell like a week old carcass. I felt like I was losing my mind. Was this part of the head injury? Was I having olfactory hallucinations? Was I going crazy? I made an appointment with my doctor, the same one who told me the side effects would fade. I sat in his sterile office, the air smelling faintly of antiseptic and burnt toast from the receptionist's lie about the wait time. I tried to explain what was happening, dancing around the specifics. I told him about the phantom smells, the way they seemed linked to certain situations. He listened patiently, then scribbled a prescription. Post-traumatic parosmia isn't uncommon, Noah, he said, his voice dripping with condescending reassurance. The brain's wiring gets a little crossed. This should help reset things. He handed me a script for an antidepressant known to be used off-label for nerve issues. I walked out of that office feeling more alone than ever. He thought I was just another head trauma case with a touch of anxiety. He didn't understand the system, the patterns, the terrifying consistency of it all. I started investigating Olivia, and I hated myself for it. While she was at work, she was a curator at a small, local history museum. I went through her things. I felt like a monster, violating the trust of the woman I loved, but I was desperate. I searched her drawers, her closet, her laptop. I found nothing. Just the normal, mundane artifacts of a life shared. Old concert tickets, photo albums filled with our smiling faces, a half-finished manuscript for a children's book she was writing. Everything was exactly as it should be. The only thing out of place was me, a paranoid lunatic sniffing his girlfriend's sweaters, trying to find the source of a smell only he could perceive. The turning point came a week later. I was paying our bills online when I noticed a recurring charge on our credit card statement. It was a small, monthly fee, just $15, to a storage unit facility on the industrial outskirts of town. I didn't remember us ever renting a storage unit. I scrolled back through the statements. The charge had been there for 3 years, starting 2 years into our relationship. I casually brought it up to her that evening, trying to keep my voice light. Hey Liv, I was just looking at the credit card bill. What's this charge for lock-it-up storage? She was chopping vegetables for dinner, her back to me. She didn't miss a beat. Oh, that's just some of my old college stuff, she said breezily. Textbooks, some furniture from my dorm. I keep meaning to go through it, but you know how it is. As she spoke, the kitchen filled with a familiar, acrid smell of burnt toast. It was a lie. A small one, maybe, but a lie nonetheless. And underneath it, a constant, unwavering foundation, the nauseating, sweet smell of rot. A simple lie about a storage unit. It shouldn't have been a big deal. People keep secrets. Maybe it was full of embarrassing memorabilia from an old relationship, or cringy teenage poetry she didn't want me to see. It was a white lie, the burnt toast told me so. But it was a crack, a tiny hairline fracture in the perfect facade of our life together. And my mind, already teetering on the edge, latched onto it with obsessive force. Why lie about something so trivial? What was in that storage unit that she felt the need to hide from me? The question consumed me. My days became a waking nightmare of feigned normalcy. I'd go to work, push pixels around on a screen, and exchange pleasantries with my coworkers, all while the background noise of my life was the scent of decay that clung to me from my home, from my clothes, from my skin where Olivia had touched me. At night, I'd lie beside her, rigid and awake, staring at the ceiling. I'd listen to her steady breathing, the soft sounds of a person deep in slumber, and all I could smell was the grave. The stench was a physical presence in the room, a third entity in our bed. I started to lose weight. Dark circles formed under my eyes. I was jumpy, irritable. Olivia noticed, of course. She'd ask me what was wrong, her voice laced with a genuine, loving concern that only made the smell of rot more pronounced, more grotesquely ironic. My evasions became more frequent, my lies more elaborate. I was becoming a liar myself, and the faint scent of my own burnt toast was a constant, self-loathing reminder. I had to know what was in that unit. The facility was called Lock It Up Storage, a drab, soulless place of corrugated steel and gravel on the far side of town. I found the address on the credit card statement. One afternoon, I called in sick to work and drove out there. The place was a maze of identical orange doors. I didn't know the unit number, and I had no way of getting in. I sat in my car for an hour, just watching, feeling like a stalker. I was about to give up when I saw her. Olivia's blue Prius pulled into the facility. My heart leaped into my throat. She got out of the car, looking around cautiously before keying in a code at the main gate. I ducked down in my seat, my pulse thundering in my ears. I watched as she drove to a row in the back, disappearing around a corner. She was there for maybe 10 minutes before she emerged, got back in her car, and drove away. She wasn't carrying anything. She hadn't put anything in or taken anything out. She had just visited. For 10 minutes. What do you do in an empty storage unit for 10 minutes? The question gnawed at me, festering. My paranoia was metastasizing, twisting every memory we'd ever shared. Our first date, that weekend trip to the coast, the night I told her I loved her for the first time. Were they all tainted? Was the scent there then, and I just didn't have the senses to perceive it? Was her entire existence with me a performance? The idea was maddening. It suggested a lie so profound, so all-encompassing, that it had no scent of its own. It was a lie that didn't need to be spoken because it was being lived. The base reality was the lie itself, and the stench of rot was its signature. I knew I couldn't go on like this. The not knowing was hollowing me out, leaving me a husk of the man I used to be. I needed proof. I needed to get inside that unit. Breaking in was out of the question. I'm a graphic designer, not a cat burglar. So I did something I'm not proud of. I waited for her to fall asleep, her lavender and old book scent now just a cruel olfactory illusion masking the decay underneath. Her keys were in her purse on the kitchen counter. My hand trembled as I fished them out. There it was, on the same ring as her car and apartment keys, a small, anonymous key with a little plastic tag. On the tag, written in her neat, familiar handwriting, was C17. The next day, I left work early, the key feeling like a hot coal in my pocket. My hands were slick with sweat as I drove back to lock it up. I punched in the gate code I'd seen her use, our anniversary, of course. The irony was a bitter pill. I found row C, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. C12, C14, C16, there it was. C17. It was a standard roll-up door, secured by a heavy-duty padlock. I took a deep breath, the key shaking in my hand. I inserted it into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click. For a moment, I just stood there, my hand on the cold metal latch. This was it. The point of no return. Whatever was behind this door would either confirm my insanity or validate a horror I couldn't yet comprehend. I braced myself, took hold of the handle, and pulled. The door groaned in protest as it rolled upward, revealing the darkness within. A wave of air washed over me, and my stomach dropped. It was the smell. The smell from my nightmares, from my bed, from my girlfriend's kiss. The sweet, putrid, undeniable stench of rot, magnified 1,000 times. It was so thick I could taste it. My eyes, adjusting to the gloom, made out the contents of the unit. It wasn't full of old textbooks or furniture. It was almost completely empty, except for a single object in the center of the concrete floor. It was a large, industrial-grade chest freezer, the kind you see in a butcher's shop. It was humming softly, and a thick layer of frost covered its white lid. And from it, seeping into the air, was the source of it all, the smell of death. My legs felt weak, my mind struggling to process the scene. The chest freezer sat there under the single, bare bulb of the storage unit, humming its low, mechanical dirge. The cold air that radiated from it did nothing to mask the overpowering stench. It was a primal smell, a scent that bypassed the brain and spoke directly to the lizard part that knows only two things: fear and flight. For a long moment, I chose neither. I was frozen, trapped in the horrifying space between disbelief and acceptance. My first coherent thought was a desperate, grasping attempt at rationalization. Maybe she was a caterer on the side. Maybe it was for a hunting hobby she'd never mentioned. Maybe it was full of frozen venison. But the smell wasn't right. It wasn't the smell of game. It was deeply, fundamentally human. My hand, acting of its own accord, reached out. My fingers, numb and clumsy, brushed against the frosted lid. The cold was sharp, biting. This was real. This was happening. I had to know. I had to see what my life had become. With a grunt of effort that was more of a sob, I lifted the lid. The cold vapor that billowed out was a physical blow, carrying with it a concentrated blast of the putrid odor. I gagged, stumbling back, but my eyes were fixed on the contents. It wasn't what I expected. There was no dismembered body, no gruesome tableau of a crime. It was something far stranger, far more impossible. Inside, lying on a bed of thick frost, was a woman. She looked exactly like Olivia. Perfect, pale, and utterly still. She wore a simple white dress, her hands folded peacefully on her chest. Her skin was flawless, waxy, like a porcelain doll. Her auburn hair was fanned out around her head. It was her, but it wasn't. It was a shell, an empty vessel, a body, a perfectly preserved corpse. As I stared, my mind collapsing in on itself, I heard a sound behind me. A soft click. I spun around, my heart seizing in my chest. Standing in the doorway of the storage unit was Olivia. My Olivia, the one who made me soup, who kissed my forehead, whose touch I now understood was a lie colder than the freezer's frost. She wasn't angry. She wasn't scared. Her expression was one of profound, weary sadness. "I didn't want you to find out this way, Noah," she said, and her voice, her beautiful, familiar voice, was the most terrifying sound I had ever heard. The smell of rot was no longer just coming from the freezer. It was pouring off of her in waves, a suffocating aura of decay. What is this?" I whispered, my voice a ragged, broken thing. "Who is that?" I pointed a trembling finger at the freezer. She looked at the body, and for the first time, I saw an emotion on her face that wasn't warmth or love. It was something ancient. Grief. That is Olivia, she said softly. The real one. My brain simply refused to compute. Then who are you? She took a step closer, and I scrambled backward, tripping over my own feet and landing hard on the concrete floor. It's complicated, she said, her sad eyes never leaving mine. I'm a replacement. A copy. The story came out in disjointed, surreal pieces. The real Olivia, my Olivia, had died 3 years ago. An aneurysm. Sudden, painless, and absolute. She had died in her sleep right next to me. Only I didn't remember it. Because it had been there. The thing that now wore her face. It told me it was a creature of opportunity, a scavenger of sorts. It didn't kill, it simply filled vacuums left by sudden loss. It found fresh grief, the raw, gaping wound of a person ripped from the world, and it stepped in. It absorbed memories, mannerisms, feelings, from the surroundings, from the grieving partner. It wove itself into the fabric of a life, patching the hole so seamlessly that no one would ever know. I took her place so you wouldn't have to be alone, it said, as if this were a kindness. I have all her memories. I feel her love for you. It's real, Noah. What I feel for you is real. The burnt toast lie about the storage unit made sense now. It was a white lie to protect a monstrous, fundamental truth. The body in the freeze-it had to keep it close. It was an anchor, a source from which it drew its form and memories. Over time, the connection would fade and it would need to refresh its template. The 10-minute visits were a maintenance of its disguise. My accident, my freakish new sense, had ruined everything. My brain, rewired by the trauma, could suddenly perceive what was always there, hidden in plain sight. It could smell the fundamental untruth of her existence. It could smell the decay she was holding at bay, the rot of the corpse she was imitating. I love you, it said again, and the words were carried on a wave of graveyard stench. And the most horrific part was, I almost believed it. In its own alien, incomprehensible way, maybe it did. It had been a perfect partner for 3 years. It had loved me in the only way it knew how, by perfectly emulating the woman I had lost. I don't know how I got out of there. I remember scrambling to my feet, running past it, not daring to look back. I got in my car and drove, with no destination in mind. I ended up in a cheap motel 2 states away, the reek of stale cigarettes a welcome respite from the smell of my life. That was a week ago. I haven't been back. It has called me dozens of times. It has left voicemails, each one in Olivia's voice, begging me to come home, telling me we can work through this. It says it can't live without me. I don't know if that's a threat or a plea. So tell me I'm crazy. Tell me it was all a hallucination, a product of a damaged brain. Because the alternative is so much worse. The alternative is that for the last 3 years, I've been sharing my bed with a monster. A loving, kind, perfect monster that smells of sweet, sweet rot. And the worst part, the part that keeps me awake in this dirty motel room, is that some small, broken part of me misses her. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and give this video a like. We appreciate everyone and can't wait to bring more stories your way.